Grateful if members leaving the chamber could do so quietly, please. The final item of business today is the members' business debate on motion number S4M 06362 in the name of Margaret Mitchell on AEDs in Scotland. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would be grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. And I call on Margaret Mitchell to open the debate. 7 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, the Automatic Electronic Defibrillators AEDs campaign in Scotland is run by First Aiders Laura and Paul McAdam-Slater, who briefed MSPs about the issue last month when they visited the Parliament. AEDs are machines which deliver an electronic shock to the heart in cases of cardiac arrest when the heart stops pumping blood. To realise the full significance of what this means, suffice to say that survival chances of those affected by cardiac arrest decrease.
Excuse me, Mrs Mitchell, can I stop you a moment? Could I ask people who are leaving the public gallery to do so quietly, please? This Parliament is in session. Thank you. Mrs Mitchell.
That the survival chances of those affected by cardiac arrest decreases by 14% for every minute without defibrillation. Furthermore, 70% of sudden cardiac arrests occur outside hospital. Of those, only 1 in 20 people currently survive. Death from a sudden cardiac arrest can occur within 10 minutes. In the UK, an estimated 4,000 people a year die from SADS, that's sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, which is a genetic heart rhythm abnormality condition, easy for me to say. And in Scotland, cardiovascular disease, CVD, is the main cause of deaths. There are 17,000 deaths from CVD in 2010, and this equates to nearly a third of all the deaths in Scotland that year. Worryingly, 50% of the people who require defibrillation do not have a previously diagnosed heart condition, and many of these individuals will be young and seemingly healthy. The campaign therefore calls for AEDs to be placed in public places, remote communities and in all fire and police vehicles across Scotland. This will include strategic locations, as cardiac arrests are by nature both unexpected and sudden. One such relatively recent high-profile case involved the collapse of Bolton Wanderers footballer Fabrice Lumumba on the pitch during an FA Cup match in 2012. TV footage, now part of a British Heart Foundation advertising campaign, shows the shock and distress registered on the faces of the other players as they watched the previously fit and healthy 20-year-old lying motionless face down on the pitch. Although technically dead for 78 minutes, Fabrice survived, partially thanks to the use of a defibrillator. The Isle of Man already has a number of AEDs, and the local Manx charity, Craig's Heartstrong Foundation, aims to raise £60,000 in 2013 to equip all of the 34 primary schools in the island with life-saving AEDs and training from St John's Ambulance. This charity was established by the Lunt family in memory of their 25-year-old son Craig, a popular young footballer who tragically died as a result of previously undiagnosed heart defects. AEDs located throughout Scotland include one here in this Parliament, a number donated by the British Heart Foundation, who, by working in partnership with the Scottish Ambulance Service and ScotMid, have succeeded in having 40 AEDs placed in stores. In 2009, Strathclyde Passenger Transport Partnership Transport bought AEDs for 6 of its subway stations and plans to extend this to all 15 subways. SPT also intends to place AEDs in East Kilbride, Greenock and Hamilton bus stations. And it's not just the efforts of big organisations which have seen AEDs located across Scotland. For evidence of this, look no further than the small village of Colston, where the local community raised nearly £3,000 to fund and install a defibrillator in the village. However, there are still far fewer AEDs in Scotland than there should be, and hence the call from the AEDs-in-Scotland campaign and the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health for AEDs to be placed strategically in public and remote places. According to a recent online discussion hosted by Scottish Ambulance Service, which asked members of the public where they would like AEDs to be placed, then the following locations were cited: public places, especially where large numbers of people gather, and in remote communities where it can take an ambulance precious time to arrive. Village halls, old phone boxes, places accessible 24 hours, and schools were also cited and suggested. An alarming 12 potentially more young people in the UK die each week from SADS. So clearly, the argument in favour of placing AEDs in schools is a compelling one. And in March this year, as part of the SADS campaign, Samantha Clinton from Bells Hill started a petition calling for all schools to have AEDs. The decision taken jointly by North Lanarkshire Council and NHS Lanarkshire to provide an AED in each of its 24 secondary schools is therefore very much to be welcomed, and it's hoped that more local authorities and NHS boards throughout Scotland will follow this example. However, it's absolutely vital that as AEDs are placed in our communities, they are mapped so their location is known, should one be required. In the Isle of Man, all AEDs on the island have to be registered at the Emergency Services Joint Control Room, which handles all 999 calls, so that people can be directed to their nearest one. This is particularly useful as it helps identify the location of AEDs held in private locations, such as office buildings, which can be accessed by the public in an emergency, as well as the public ones provided in cabinets. In order to help ensure that the whereabouts of defibrillators are known, AEDs-in-Scotland campaign has undertaken its own mapping scheme. So far, they've found 104 AEDs in Scotland, but only 29 of them are accessible 24 hours. Scottish Ambulance believe that there are approximately 327 in total, but they don't know where they are all located. Despite the apprehension about being able to use defibrillators, they are very easy to use, and once switched on, the AED guides the operator through the procedure using a computer-generated voice. Once connected, the AED automatically analyses the victim's heart rhythm and only delivers the shock when it detects the presence of a heart rhythm that requires defibrillation. It also guides the operator when to begin chest compression and when to stop. So in an emergency, anyone can be confident that they can use the AED safely and correctly. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, AEDs can and have saved lives, which is why campaigns like the one run by Laura and Paul are to be welcomed and supported in seeking to have more of these important machines located across Scotland, in raising awareness of sudden cardiac events, and crucially, in explaining the necessary action required. I very much look forward to the Minister's comments on this important issue.
Thank you very much, and apologies for the earlier interruption. Speeches of 4 minutes, please. We're quite tight for time. I call Aileen MacLeod to be followed by Malcolm Chisholm.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And let me begin by congratulating Margaret Mitchell in bringing forward this debate, and at the same time to give my apologies that I will have to leave the chamber before the Minister responds to attend an urgent constituency matter. Now, I attended Laura and Paul McAdam-Slater's recent presentation to MSPs, which made the case for more widely available public life-saving AEDs across Scotland, and I think they make a very good case, and I very much support what they're trying to achieve. The members have already reflected on the statistics, but I do think they're worth repeating. I mean, 70% of sudden cardiac arrests occur outside a hospital environment, and within that 70%, there is around a 1 in 20 chance of survival. Now, I was very struck by that statistic. I wasn't aware of it before, and it certainly has made me think. But the sudden cardiac arrests, though clearly very dangerous, are treatable, and defibrillation is the accepted method of treatment. The chances of survival are dramatically increased if defibrillation can be delivered quickly, but decrease equally dramatically for every minute the treatment is delayed. And we've heard from Margaret Mitchell, the AEDs are easy to use and they can be used by someone with no medical training at all. So the argument seems clear that provision of AEDs in public places may very well make a significant difference. And in terms of our international comparisons, some countries have a comprehensive rollout of publicly available AEDs, while others are at various stages of development. For example, Hong Kong is in the process of rolling out 300 AEDs in public locations, but the lion's share of the plaudits must go to New Zealand. With a population similar to Scotland's, they have 2,941 publicly available AEDs and a fantastic online interactive map so that you can see exactly where they are. Now, for me, that is particularly instructive. Many are located in health centres, hospitals and fire stations where we might expect them. But there are also very many private businesses, residential addresses, dental surgeries and even boats, all of which are registered online and visible on the map. Presiding Officer, Margaret Mitchell's motion refers to rural areas in particular, and in Dumfries and Galloway there are already some moves towards wider provision of AEDs on an individual local community basis. And some community councils have used community benefit money from wind farms to purchase the defibrillators, which are available at a public building such as the village hall or shop. Other communities are participating in the Scottish Ambulance Services Volunteer First Responder Scheme, and as well as basic first aid and CPR training, an AED is a crucial part of the first responders' equipment. Though not publicly available, they are ultra-local and they can cut response times dramatically. There are first responders teams already established and running in a number of Galloway's remoter communities, and Dalbeattie, though by no means as remote, is setting up a group that will provide an out-of-hours first responder service to almost 5,000 people. Of course, welcome though all of this activity is, it relies on individuals and groups recognising the importance of the issue and being prepared to act. And in closing, Presiding Officer, I want to mention the training and awareness. Conversations with the British Heart Foundation have established that a good number of Dumfries and Galloway secondary schools and some of their primary schools have had heart start training. So to complete the equation, we need the equipment, that's for sure, but I think we also need public awareness. Presiding Officer, I'm very pleased that we've had this debate tonight and highlighted this issue, and I'm particularly grateful to Margaret Mitchell for securing it. I wish Laura and Paul McAdam-Slater every success with their campaign and hope that in time we will see many more publicly available AEDs across Scotland. I would also like to commend the efforts of North Lanarkshire Council as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call Malcolm Chisholm to be followed by Nanette Milne.
Presiding Officer, I would like to congratulate Margaret Mitchell on bringing forward this important motion, and I must say I am actually looking forward to the rest of the debate, including the speech from the Minister, because the last statement of the Scottish Government's position I could see on this was in the Better Heart Disease and Stroke Care Action Plan from 2009, which said that boards had to follow the advice of cardiac-managed clinical networks in this regard. And I must say I don't know what advice was given to different boards, so I do look forward to that update. That action plan was also interesting in presenting the evidence such as existed on this, and it referred to an evaluation of the scheme in England, which was really ahead of us in this regard at that time. And that evidence did suggest that AEDs were very effective in busy public places, and that it looked as if they were also promising results for community first responders. And that was clearly very important for Scotland, because so many areas of Scotland do rely on community first responders. So I do hope that they do have AEDs available to them. But of course the other dimension to all this in Scotland is very much the rural issue, which is referred to in the motion. And I was interested therefore to read about a campaign called AEDs in Scotland, a campaign based in Fort William. And that campaign, and there's other ones that of course are mentioned in the motion and that I'll refer to in a moment, but that campaign has argued for AEDs to be readily available in public places in local communities where ambulances are unable to reach a cardiac arrest within 5 minutes of the 999 call, and to be carried in all police and fire service vehicles. And they also have a map of availability which Margaret Mitchell referred to in general terms, and that's shown on the AEDs-in-Scotland website and on the online AED locator, and it indicates that the majority of the devices are kept in more remote locations already. However, as members will realise, a delay in the reaction time of emergency services may not occur simply as a result of geography. Towns with a high density of population or compromised road networks may also see slower responses, and that's why, of course, further investment in urban areas is also essential. Now, the motion draws particular attention to the issue of young people who become victims of SADs. I'll just say that for the sake of speed. Everyone knows what it refers to because of Margaret Mitchell's speech. As the AEDs-in-Scotland campaign highlights, this condition for the majority affects people between the ages of 12 and 35. However, children as young as 6 years old have been victims of SADs. Specifically, we need to examine the case for having defibrillators for use in the education environment. The motion quite rightly points to the great work done by individuals like Samantha Clinton and her involvement with the Big Shock campaign in raising awareness of cardiac arrest in young people and their parents. Recent news that North Lanarkshire Council will install a defibrillator in every secondary school is indeed welcome. The initiative is part of the British Heart Foundation's Heart Start Schools programme, which aims to teach all students in Scotland basic life-saving skills by 2015. Now, as we've heard, all 24 secondary schools in North Lanarkshire will be fitted with the machines before the end of March 2014, ensuring that any incident where a school child or employee suffers from cardiac failure will be met with a timely response until medical help is being sought. The programme is particularly useful as it allows young people to recognise the early signs of an oncoming cardiac arrest, such as dizziness and chest pains, and respond in a calm and responsible manner to help or take appropriate action if they themselves require help. And I think this is important, actually, to widen out the debate to this more general campaign, because clearly it's not just a matter of the AEDs, but also emergency life support more generally. And that's what is highlighted by the British Heart Foundation campaign. And I believe that the Government has awarded a fund of £110,000 to develop sustainable models to create increased provision of emergency life support training in secondary schools more generally by working with a designated number of local authorities. So I would welcome more information about that, because I haven't read any more about that from the generalities. So I think I can conclude at that point. I suppose I ought to add, of course, that part of this training is also in CPR cardiopulmonary resuscitation, because that may also be required. So I think that wider education of young people is very crucial, but clearly having the devices in schools is a very important part of that.
Thank you very much. Call Annette Millen to be followed by Stuart Stevenson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I too would congratulate my colleague Margaret Mitchell on securing this debate so that we can acknowledge the work of the AEDs in Scotland campaign, which seeks to extend the availability of automatic external defibrillators within schools and public places, and in remote areas where it is difficult for an ambulance to respond quickly. It's a sobering thought that 12 young people still die each week in the UK from sudden cardiac arrhythmia, usually ventricular fibrillation, which can kill within minutes in the absence of a defibrillator and effective CPR. And most of these victims are very fit young people, often skilled athletes. But of course, cardiac arrest can occur in all age groups or as the result of accident, and it is important that as many people as possible know how to deal appropriately with such a serious emergency. In the old days when I was a young doctor, defibrillators were scary pieces of equipment and quite difficult to use safely and effectively. Now, however, the modern automatic external defibrillators are very user-friendly and quite easy for members of the public to operate. Sudden death in young people from cardiac arrhythmia was brought to my attention very soon after I became an MSP 10 years ago by the redoubtable Wilma Gunn from Selkirk, who lost her own son from this cause. Wilma asked me, along with several other MSPs, to be a patron of her charity, Scottish Heart, for which she campaigned tirelessly. Scottish Heart had the twin purposes of seeking cardiac screening for all young people taking part in strenuous sport and raising funds to put defibrillators in strategic places like football grounds and sports stadia. I don't know how many of these machines Scottish Heart funded, but there were many, not least one in the Dons home ground at Pittodrie in Aberdeen. I remember facilitating a meeting in St Andrew's House with Malcolm Chisholm when he was Health Minister, together with civil servants, Wilma Gunn
and Professor Hillis from Glasgow, an expert in sudden cardiac death, to discuss the feasibility of screening young people who might be at risk. The perceived wisdom at the time was that large-scale screening wasn't appropriate, but things did move on, and from recollection, I think it is now available for young athletes. Perhaps the Minister might be able to correct me if I'm wrong in that. It's important to raise awareness of the possibility of sudden cardiac arrest and what can be done to save the lives of those who fall victim to it. Widespread distribution of AEDs is needed. Together, as has been pointed out, together with education of people from an early age in how to recognise cardiac arrest, how to do CPR and how to use an AED. Samantha Clinton is to be congratulated on her efforts to have a defibrillator placed in every school in her local authority area, and on designing for local primary school pupils colouring sheets aimed at teaching their parents about sudden cardiac arrest. I'm sure her work could be used as a template for other council areas and help to spread the word generally about how to recognise and cope with potentially fatal cardiac collapse. Presiding Officer, I would conclude by thanking Margaret Mitchell once again for highlighting the excellent work going on in her region and other parts of Scotland, and I too look forward to the Minister's response to the debate. Thank you.
Many thanks. I now call Stuart Stevenson to be followed by Siobhan McMahon.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'm sure it's a great relief that we have the Minister that we do here responding to the debate, because if I recall correctly, of course, he was a member of Scotland's Emergency Services when he was a member of Mountain Rescue Team. And so I'm sure he will be more than adequately trained should any of us here require the necessary first responder interventions. This is an excellent and opportune debate with a very comprehensive motion that I think covers many of the bases in front of us. The key thing that underlies this is that early intervention in these circumstances dramatically improves the likelihood of long-term good outcomes. There's been reference by Nanette Milne and Malcolm Chisholm to the related intervention of cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And I think we should say a little more on that because, of course, for any of us who've been trained to do it, albeit I must be incredibly rusty now, it is easy to watch and difficult to do. You require the confidence to put your full weight behind the cardiopulmonary resuscitation as you press down on the person who's suffering a heart attack's chest, and be prepared to break ribs if that's what it takes, as in some cases in older people may be a consequence. So I think associated with this, we do have to look at the practical training that has to be given to people to administer CPR. It's not just a question of having a bit of paper that tells you how to do it. You need to realise it needs a lot of physical effort to do it. So I hope that we take tent of that. I'm sure that Laura and Paul, as trained first aiders, are already familiar with that, and that that's partly why we've got CPR in the motion. There are other things that are very simple that we should hopefully see that people are trained in our schools, our youngsters. Just simply getting people into the recovery position can often be a decisive intervention between people's survival and people's non-survival, because if associated with a heart attack can be vomiting. And if you're in the wrong position, you can drown in your own vomit. So people should be taught the recovery position. So there are some very, very simple things that can be done. I represent many of Scotland's fishermen, and these days a large proportion of our fishing boats carry these automated devices that are so dramatically easier to use compared to the kind of equipment that Dr. Milne used and that came in some time after my father graduated in medicine. For me, there is a small personal element in it. My grandfather had a heart attack on what was then called the Lower Station, Dunfermline, in 1930, long before I was born, and that was the end of him. Today, I would like to think that such interventions via an AED and CPR would have meant that he would have lived beyond his 68 years when he died at that age. I hope that this debate stimulates wider interest. I hope that we hear some interesting things from the Minister, and I hope that he does not have to make any personal interventions using his pre-existing training. Presiding Officer.
Many thanks. Siobhan McMahon to be followed by Fiona MacLeod.
Thank you. I congratulate Margaret Mitchell on bringing this debate to the Chamber this evening. Use of AEDs in Scotland is a subject I've spoken about in this Chamber before. I therefore welcome the opportunity to make a small contribution to the debate this evening. When I spoke in my own members' debate during November 2011 regarding the Heart Start campaign run by the British Heart Foundation and North Lanarkshire Council, I spoke of the need for introducing emergency life support training in schools across Scotland. I asked if we could afford not to do such a thing. I know that since 2011, a number of schools have taken part in this training. However, it is still not a universal service across Scotland. I know that the Curriculum for Excellence provides schools with the opportunity to add this training to the school day, but I would still like to encourage the Scottish Government to do more in this regard so that no pupil goes without ELS training from now on. During the debate, I also spoke about the Heart Start campaign, which is run by North Lanarkshire Council and led by the Healthy Lifestyle Coordinator Charles Fawcett. I told the Chamber that a pilot was being run at St Ambrose High School in Coatbridge to better educate staff and pupils in the use of defibrillators. At that time, defibrillators or AEDs were not an integral part of the school building. That is why I was delighted to learn that North Lanarkshire Council had installed AEDs in all of the 24 secondary schools in the area, the first local authority in Scotland to do so. The cost of this initiative is £70,000, and as we have heard already, is partly funded by North Lanarkshire Council, NHS Lanarkshire and Amy. The cost is nothing in comparison to the value we get from a generation of lifesavers in our communities. For every minute that passes without defibrillation in the aftermath of a cardiac arrest, the chances of survival decrease by 14%. It is therefore essential that AEDs become more widely available. Ideally, they would be held in all public buildings, along transport routes, in private gyms and in all our workplaces. I know that I am not alone in calling for these measures. Others have mentioned it tonight. And organisations like the British Heart Foundation or AEDs-in-Scotland have also called for this action. I hope that the Minister will be able to commit to action on this matter in his closing speech. I have had the opportunity to attend 2 Heart Start ELS training sessions in Lanarkshire recently. These sessions were carried out by a volunteer from St Andrews First Aid Service. One session was given to young carers. I know that I don't have to explain to the Chamber how vital this session was to the young people. The other session was given to teachers in order to train them in the use of the new AEDs. As I said, these are essential sessions and something I personally have found invaluable. As members know, due to my disability, I only have the use of one hand. As a result, I have always shied away from going forward for a first aid course. However, from these sessions, I know some basic first aid, but more importantly, I know that I can use AEDs very easily, far more easily than heart compressions. Without the education that programmes like this offer, many of us would not be able to help if called upon at the time of emergency. I therefore call on the Minister to establish a programme of training like this across Scotland. I congratulate North Lanarkshire Council and Charles Fawcett on the initiatives that they have brought forward already. I congratulate the Heart Start campaign in providing ELS training across schools in Scotland, and I congratulate Margaret Mitchell again for bringing this debate to the Chamber this evening. I hope AEDs will be in all our schools the next time we debate this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call Fiona MacLeod.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I also add my thanks to Margaret Mitchell for bringing this debate before Parliament? And in following Siobhan McMahon, I remember speaking in her debate in November 2011. And I think what I spoke on then was what I'm going to speak on again today, a charity very close to my heart called Lucky to Be Here. It was established in Skye in 2007 by a friend of mine, Ross Cowie, when he had almost suffered a fatal cardiac arrest himself. And after their fundraising since 2007, there's now nearly 30 defibrillators around, especially the Highlands and Islands, but we have them in the Central Belt as well now, funded by Lucky to Be Here. But what I think is so important about what Lucky to Be Here have set out to do is not just to fundraise and put in defibrillators in public spaces, but they always give training as well. So when our community says they want a defibrillator, they join with Heart Start and everybody is trained to use the defibrillator there. And that led me on to working with the British Heart Foundation, etc., on ELS in schools, as Siobhan McMahon has mentioned. And actually, I loved your description, Ms McMahon, of a generation of lifesavers. I think that is very fitting and what we should be working towards. And I was absolutely delighted last year at the SNP conference when not only Alec Neil as the Cabinet Secretary, but Alex Salmond as the First Minister signed the British Heart Foundation's petition on ELS in schools. So we do have a government that's absolutely committed to doing this, and I'm sure it's going to happen. And to Margaret Mitchell, I would say that Lucky to Be Here's 30-odd defibrillators are all mapped. They're on their website, and when you click on it, you actually get the address and a picture of the building it's located in. So if you're panicking, you've at least seen the picture of where you've got to run towards. So really a short contribution, Presiding Officer. This has been a really good debate. It's a really important debate, and I'd just always like to highlight the work that Ross Cowie and Lucky to Be Here are doing on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite the Minister, Michael Matheson, to respond to the debate in around 7 minutes, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I, like others, begin by congratulating Margaret Mitchell on securing time for this important debate. The sudden or unexpected death of a young person, which has been caused by an inherited cardiac condition, while it may be rare, is nevertheless always a tragedy. And although we've made great advances in recent years in reducing the number of people who die as a result of cardiac events, there is still much more we need to do in helping to reduce it yet further. A number of members in their contributions have made reference to SAD and the particular devastating effect it can have on a young person, often with no symptoms and with no indication that they are at any particular risk. And I recognise the work that's undertaken by the Familial Arrhythmia Network in Scotland, FANS as they're known, who play a vital role in helping young people identify with arrhythmia. They, in the work that they undertake, bring together cardiologists, clinical geneticists, pathologists to help to ensure that we reduce the risk of sudden cardiac death, targeting young people who may be at particular risk. And I know that Nanette Millen, in her contribution, made reference to CAIA. That is the cardiac assessment for young athletes, and that's something which we have provided a further £40,000 to in order to allow that programme to continue, so that we can look at what further measures could be undertaken to help to develop it further and to provide protection to young people who are involved in athletics. We've also taken forward a range of work with the Scottish Ambulance Service in Scotland. We've provided them with some £7.5 million to allow them to purchase state-of-the-art defibrillators for all Scottish Ambulance Service ambulance. That has resulted in allowing them to purchase over 500 defibrillators to be installed in all of their transport ambulances. Members have also made reference to the fact, as Stuart Stevenson did in his contribution in particular, about the delay in performing defibrillation can reduce the chances of someone actually having a recovery, and the important role that AEDs and PADs, publicly accessible defibrillators, can have in helping to support someone who may have arrested prior to the emergency services arriving themselves. I think this whole issue around AEDs and PADs has to be looked at in the wider context of community resilience and what we can do within the wider community to help to support the community to make use of these pieces of equipment when they are actually available. Because there's no point having them publicly available or in locations if individuals don't have the confidence and the ability to actually make use of the equipment at that particular time. And what we've been doing with the Scottish Ambulance Service is that they've been working with, particularly in remote and in some urban communities where there are particular opportunities to have the location of a publicly available defibrillator to be provided that could have a benefit to that particular community. Some of that work has been taken forward by looking at areas, particularly remote areas, urban venues where there is a high footfall, where there are clusters of cardiac arrests that have occurred previously, and they're also looking to then train local members of the community and be able to use this equipment. And in order to help to support that work, since 2011 the Scottish Ambulance Service have developed a partnership with ScotMed, who also have the Semichem network, in partnership again with the British Heart Foundation, where they have been identifying locations where the shops are, that we could actually locate a defibrillator while training and supporting the staff on how to make use of that within the local community itself. And I've got no doubt that that will help to make them more accessible, but also to help to make sure that they have individuals who can make use of them, who have some training. And for those who haven't, and Stuart Stevenson gave away some of my background in the course of his contribution, and for those who haven't had training in the use of an AED, they are extremely simple. You can't shock someone accidentally. If the person shouldn't be shocked, the system will not allow a shock to be discharged. It will also monitor where there is any rhythm there, and in some cases it will indicate that no shock should be provided because no support is going to be necessary. So they are extremely safe, and although there are several models, they are extremely easy to use with a little bit of training and understanding of them. Now, I recognise that in providing these units in different parts of the country, we need to make sure that we have an understanding as to where they are at any given time. And the Scottish Ambulance Service are taking forward that piece of work right now. They are taking forward work to make sure that we map the public accessible defibrillators, so that it's then built into their command and control unit, so that when someone calls for an ambulance, they are in a situation where they can direct that individual where they can make access of a pad at that particular point. And I understand the defibrillators that are being provided in the schools in Lanarkshire will form part of that information in their command and control service, and I've got no doubt that will help to support them. But can I also say I agree with Malcolm Chisholm in particular. I think it's important that we recognise that although technology can help us a considerable degree in helping to support someone who may be having a cardiac arrest, we also need to make sure that we help to support people to understand the basics around CPR as well. It's a bit like going in a mountain with a GPS. What happens if your GPS breaks down on you and you don't know how to use a compass? You need to be able to go back to the basics, and part of that is CPR. And the stuff that we're doing in terms of the work we're taking forward with the British Heart Foundation, that Malcolm Chisholm made reference to, where we're providing funding support in order to develop the Heart Start programme, which will provide emergency life support training for school pupils, and how we can take that forward in schools is being developed at this moment, and we hope to make an announcement later this year in order to take that further forward. I'm also aware of the Lucky to Be Here, who are a charity based in Skye that Fiona MacLeod made reference to, have undertaken tremendous work, not only around AEDs, but also around CPR training for school pupils. And we've also got work that's been undertaken by Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland with Education Scotland in developing a national emergency life support education resource, which can be used in classrooms itself as part of the health and wellbeing part of the curriculum for excellence. So I think technology has a lot to give and support in addressing this particular issue, but we also have to keep it in the wider context of educating our young people about how to undertake CPR as and when it's appropriate. And the work that's been taken forward, I believe, with the British Heart Foundation and the Scottish Government will help to support that being delivered in our schools across the country. And I hope, Presiding Officer, that's given members some assurance of the work that we're undertaking to help to make sure publicly available defibrillators are properly mapped and more widely available in areas that they can be most appropriately used, alongside helping to support training of school pupils in understanding the basics of CPR.
Many thanks, Minister. That concludes Margaret Mitchell's debate on AEDs in Scotland, and I now close this meeting of Parliament.